The financial result should be prepared as per the rules and regulations of the government. The government is supposed to give the promotional activities in order to promote the business entities. The government will be having the direct participation in every business which is happening in the state. The government will be framing some rules and regulations which are supposed to be followed by the business entity. So with this intention, the government plays a very major role if it comes to business. Hello everyone, I am Arun Kumar, lecturer in Department of Commerce and Management, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. Dear students, welcome to this new session on unit number 2, that is Government and Legal Environment. So in this session, we'll be discussing about what is government environment, and also we'll be discussing about what is legal environment. So moving on to the today's concept, government functions of the state. Yes, government functions of the state is nothing but a government will be having a very important role if it comes to business. So if any business entity is there in a particular state or in any particular country, yes, government will be having a very important role. How and why it is needed? Why the government need to worry about the industries or the business entities? Yes, because the business entities are supposed to pay the tax to the government, and the government is supposed to give some business entities, and government will be allocating the resources to the business entities. And also the government will be framing some rules and regulations which are supposed to be followed by the business entity. So with this intention, the government plays a very major role if it comes to business. So in case if there is no stable government, if there is no stable government in a particular state, then what will happen? Obviously, if the government goes on changing every 5 years once or 3 years once or every 10 years once, then whoever going to elect as a new government, okay, those governments are going to set off their own rules and regulations. What they'll do, they set up their own rules and regulations. So how it impacts? So it impacts very negatively on the business entity. So to know about that, whether the government is going to impact negatively or positively on our business entity, or what and all the rules and regulations we have with respect to the government environment and how it impact, we are going to discuss about that particular concept in today's session. So in the most modern economies, the state's regulatory role is now broader and more complex than ever before, covering such areas as the environment and the financial sectors, as well as more traditional areas such as monopolies. Yes, earlier days we never used to worry about the government impact on a business entity, but nowadays, yes, obviously we have to worry about the government environment with respect to our business entity. So earlier we never used to think about how it's going to impact, and we never considered the government as one of the factor which affects the business entity. But in the modern society, in the modern era, we have to consider the government as a factor with respect to our business entity, whether with respect to financial sector as well as in more traditional areas such as monopolies. Next, the design of regulation needs to fit the capability of state regulatory agencies and the sophistication of markets, and give greater emphasis to personal responsibility. Yes, here the rules and regulations which are framed, by the government, by the state government or the central government, that should strengthen the business entity, that should help the business entity. If the rules and regulations formed by the government is not going to help the business entities, then the business entities can't sustain for the longer period, and they will be facing one or the other problem in the business. So with that intention, what the government should do, they always should be in favor of the business entities, and they should frame the good rules and regulations, and also they should have to support the business entities in order to encourage them, in order to encourage the business entities. Moving further, economic roles of government. So regulatory role, yes, the first economic role of government is regulatory role. Regulation may cover a wide spectrum extending from entry into a business through the conduct of the business to financial results of the business and also the exit. Regulation is a very important for the proper functioning of a market economy. Yes, regulation is what? Regulation is nothing but controlling. So in an economic role of government, the government have the regulatory role. That means the government have the controlling role over the business. So how it's going to control the business entity? In what way the government is going to control the business entity? So as the sentence says, it covers a wide spectrum extending from entry into a business. Yes. So starting from the entry into the business, if any person wants to enter into the business, so what and all the rules and regulations the person is supposed to follow, and what and all the conditions the person is supposed to fulfill, and what is the minimum investment the person is supposed to invest in the business. So everything will be regulated by the government, and the conduct of the business to financial result. Yes, if you are conducting the business, so what and all the process you're supposed to follow, and in what way you're supposed to manufacture the product, or if you are giving any services, in what way you're supposed to give the services to the customers, and the process as well as the way of serving the society. So everything will be determined and regulated by the government, and also the financial results. So the business entities can't give their financial results as they want. They can't give the financial results as they want. The financial result should be prepared as per the rules and regulations of the government. So regulations are made by the government, and every business entity is supposed to follow those rules and regulations. So that is how the government have the control over the business entity. And also the exit. Yes, if any business wants to exit from their services, if they stop their business, then obviously at that time also they have to follow certain rules and regulations which are framed by the government. So this is how the government is going to regulate all the activities of the business entity. So before starting up the business, what we are supposed to do? We are supposed to look into each and every factor, how the government is going to impact on our business, in what way the government have the rights to have the control on our business. About this, each and every factors we are supposed to analyze. Then only we have to enter the business by looking at whether it's going to help us or whether it's going to trouble us. Next, entrepreneurial role. So direct participation of government in business was very common, particularly in the socialist and developing countries. Reasons included ideological and dearths of private entrepreneurship and capital. Privatization, however, has become widespread since the mid 1980s. Yes, here in each and every business entities, the government will be having the direct participation. Yes, the government will be having the direct participation. If any person is doing the business in Karnataka, yes, obviously that person comes under the control of the government, and they have to follow the conditions which are framed by the government. Simply they can't go as they want in the business entity. So they'll be having the quite direct participation in the business entities activities. In case if it comes to financial services, yes, obviously certain rules are framed by the government. Those rules should be followed while you are into the financial services sector. If it comes to the production sector, if you are producing a product, then certain rules are made by the government. Then you are supposed to follow those rules and regulations to manufacture the product. But after 1980s, we have a concept called privatization. Yes, even though we are in privatization era, we have to follow the rules and regulations. Privatization, yes, you can take your own decisions. You need not to wait for the government approve, but certain rules should be followed. So government will be having the direct participation in every business which is happening in the state. Next one, planning role. So the national necessity for proper utilization of scarce resources and prioritization of development objectives and ideological reasons have made this an important role of governments in the developing and socialist country. Yes, the government will be having the planning role. Yes, whether it respect to resources, allocation of resources, or whether it is respect to allocation of financial resources, or whether it is respect to allocation of human resource. So whatever. So at the time of allocation of any resources, the government should have the plan in what way is it supposed to allocate the resources to each and every business entities, so that the business entities will get all the benefits and they will run their business without any complications and confusions. Next, promotional role. So this is also more important in developing countries than in the developed, because speedy development of the industry and commerce and the economy requires the development of the infrastructure, including facilitating organizations. Yes, the government will also be having the promotional role if it comes to business entities. So yearly once the Karnataka government will be conducting commerce fest or the business fest, and every districts will be conducting the business fest, so where the different country people comes and invest in our state, so that it's going to helpful for our particular business entities. So if one business entity is not having the sufficient fund to improve their business or to develop their business, so if we call other people, okay, if we promote those business entities, then other people will come and they invest their money in the business, and the business can be developed in future. Yes, if you want to become a developed country, if a particular state wants to become a developed state, obviously promoting the business is most important. Without promoting the business, not possible to develop. So what we are supposed to do as a government, the government is supposed to give the promotional activities in order to promote the business entities. So if they promote the business entities, yes, indirectly they are promoting our country and they are helping the country to become a developed country in future. Next thing is the legal environment. So far we discussed about government environment and the economic role of government environment. So now we will be discussing about the legal environment. So the legal environment is the principle of law, provides uniformity and certainty to the administration of justice. Legal system of a country is formed by government. Yes, the legal environment is all about the rules and regulations which are framed by the government. Yes, who is going to frame the rules and regulations? Yes, obviously the government is going to frame the rules and regulations. Whether it is with respect to the Labor Act, whether it is respect to the Consumers Act, or whether it is respect to the Companies Act, or whether it is respect to the any kind of act, the government is going to frame the rules and regulations, so where it treats each and every business entity equally. And the administration of justice, the legal system of a country is formed by the government. Yes, the legal system, the rules and regulations of any country will be formed by the government. So the laws which are passed by the government for business operation is caused legal environment, such as the Sales of Goods Act 1930, Indian Companies Act 1956, Income Tax Act 1961, Consumer Protection Act 1986, the Weight and Measures Act 1958, Environment Protection Act 1986, Agricultural Policy, Industrial Policy, Foreign Investment Policy, Monetary Policy, the Factories Act 1948, the Minimum Wage Act 1948. So the laws which are passed by the government for business operations is called legal environment. Yes, the laws which are passed by the government is called the legal environment. So which are those laws passed by the government? So these are all the different laws passed by the government, and each and every business entity is supposed to follow the laws which are passed by the government. If they are not ready to follow those rules and regulations, then they will not be allowed to do the business in a particular state. So if they want to run the business, they have to follow the laws which are framed by the government, or else they won't be allowed to run the business in a particular state or in a particular country. So the different laws like the Sale of Goods Act 1930, Indian Companies Act, or Consumer Protection Act, or Labor Act, agricultural policy, industrial policy, or the foreign investment policy, monetary policy. We have different types of laws. So all these laws are applicable to all the business entities, and all the business entities are supposed to follow the laws which are framed by the government. So this is called legal environment. So the legal environment is going to give a brief introduction about the rules and regulations which are to be followed by the business entities, and the laws will be formed by the government of the country. And the different forms formed in India is, these are all the different forms of laws which are formed in India. So moving further, the importance of legal environment. Yes, why this legal environment is important, why we are supposed to worry about this legal environment. The first thing is laws on production or sale. The production of sales of certain goods is prohibited or at least severely restricted in many countries. This includes, among others, selling of them dangerous drugs, guns and explosives, for instance. Yes, the laws on production or sales. Yes, we have certain laws on production and sale of certain goods and services. Sometimes we are not supposed to produce certain goods like explosives or drugs, guns. We are not supposed to manufacture those kind of goods. So for that purpose, what we have the laws on production or sale of certain goods. Simply we can't sell the guns, simply we can't sell the explosives. So only the people who are going to get the license from the government, only those people will be allowed to sell the guns or explosive or whatever the items they wanted to sell. So there are some restrictions on producing and also on selling of few products and services. So for that purpose, we need the law or the legal environment. Next, consumer protection. Yes, so to protect our consumers, yes, this legal environment is most important, because if the business entity is not producing a proper quality goods, and if the business entity is fixing more price on a particular product, and if the business entity is making any fraud with respect to selling the product to the consumers, so then where the consumers are supposed to go? Yes, if there is any law which protects the consumers, right, then the consumer can go and file a case against those kind of business entities, and then he'll get justice. So with that intention, what they'll do, they introduce few laws which are going to be supportive for the consumers. So in legal environment, yes, it is very much important for consumer protection. So moving further, employee protection. Yes, to protect our employees, some rules and regulations are most important, because in some companies they hire the employee by promising that they are going to keep that employee for next 5 years, but after 2 or 3 months, what they'll do, they are going to fire the employee without giving any proper reasons. Or sometimes at the time of giving the job, what the employer will do, he'll say he'll pay 30,000. After hiring the employee, what the employer will do, he'll pay only 10,000. So in order to avoid these type of confusions, in order to give protection to the employee, we have certain rules and regulations. So every business entity have to follow those rules and regulations. For example, Labor Act we have. In Labor Act, that describes how many hours employee is supposed to work, how many hours an employee is supposed to work, and how many leaves he can take in a week, and how many CLs he can take in a year, and what is the maternity leave period given to the employee, and what should be the basic salary, and what should be the different facilities are supposed to be given to the employee. So these all information will be there in the Labor Act. So every business entity is supposed to follow the Labor Act, and they have to provide all the services to the employee. So with these rules and regulations, yes, the employee is going to get some benefits, and he will be protected against any threat which is going to happen to the employee. Next one, tax and financial laws. Yes, tax is the main source of income. Tax is the main source of income for the government. So without taking the tax, government can't provide the facilities to the society. So what will happen? Tax and financial laws, it's going to guide the business entities that what is the tax is supposed to be payable on their profit, and how they are supposed to compute the financial statement, and what percent of tax they are supposed to pay, and in what way they are compute the tax. So every information will be given with respect to the tax and financial laws, and according to that the business entities are supposed to pay the tax to the government, and according to that the business entities are supposed to prepare the financial statement at the end of the every year. So in this session, dear students, we discussed about the government environment and the economic role of government environment, and we also discussed what is legal environment and the importance of legal environment. So with this, I'll be winding up this session. For more videos, keep watching. Until then, thank you all.